Hello, folks. Welcome back. Breaking news out of South Africa late this afternoon, the 4th of September, 2025. The South African government had scheduled a joint or multinational naval exercise, the third iteration of an Operation Mosi III, and they scheduled it not for August, not for September, not for December, not for October, but for the exact same time frame that the G20 meeting is scheduled to take place in November of this year, when the United States is supposed to take over the presidency from South Africa after their year of being the president of the G20, handing it over to the U.S. It's an open question whether President Donald Trump will attend the G20 in South Africa. He's indicated he doesn't plan to because he's not thrilled with South Africa's political actions. So what happens today? Well, a statement on joint BRICS military exercise. Of course, the term joint, that may be a South African terminology, but for U.S. terminology, that is not the correct terminology. It's multinational or combined. Statement on combined BRICS military exercise was how we would say it in U.S. vernacular. Joint would be inter-service, so Marines, Army, Air Force working together, Navy. But combined is with other nations. Whatever the case is, South Africa has an announcement. And the statement reads, in view of activities related to the South African G20 presidency, the Department of Defense is undertaking engagements on the postponement of the joint naval exercise between South Africa, Russia, and China planned for November 2025. This is the third iteration of the exercise, which takes place every 2 years between these BRICS partners. The People's Republic of China is the host for this year's exercise. In consultation with the Presidency and the Department of International Relations in cooperation, DIRCO, the Department of Defense is engaging its counterparts in the People's Republic of China on a postponement of the exercise to a mutually suitable date. Now, this is to ensure that the exercise does not impact on logistical security and other arrangements associated with South Africa's G20 presidency. South Africa's participation in military exercises of this nature with various countries is part of the furtherance of sound multilateral and bilateral relations. As it has in the past, South Africa continues to hold joint military exercises with a broad range of countries. In the last few years, SANDF has conducted joint and multinational exercises with countries such as Brazil, China, France, Germany, Russia, and the United States. What they don't mention is that they reneged on the status of forces agreement and refused to allow U.S. troops to come to South Africa for an exercise that was supposed to have taken place recently because they wouldn't let them bring their weapons, so the U.S. backed out of it. So they don't mention that. They're relying on exercise from a couple years ago to claim they've done something with the U.S., failing to mention the obvious, that they reneged on the status force agreement, no doubt under pressure from their overlords in Beijing. Speaking of that, the reason for the postponement or effort to postpone this now, they say, is to ensure the exercise doesn't impact logistical security and other arrangements for the G20 presidency. I'm sorry, is the G20 presidency being held offshore? Are the representatives G20 going to be on the SS Drakensberg for this meeting? I thought it was taking place in Sandton in Johannesburg. The Navy is one small element of the South African National Defense Force. Do they need the Navy to pull off security for the G20 summit? 1,000 miles, more than 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles in from the shoreline? No, folks, this is a face-saving statement by the Department of Defense in South Africa. They're trying to save face here because they cocked up, they screwed up, they made a huge mistake, throwing yet another insult in the face of Washington, D.C. Now, this raises a broader question. The reaction that's going to come from the political left in South Africa, and we know what that's going to be. The likes of the EFF and MK and leftists are going to scream and cry that they're kowtowing to Donald Trump. They're bowing down to the imperial power. Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that perhaps, maybe, just maybe, an adult somewhere within the African National Congress, unlikely it's a DIRCO because they're not very bright, but somewhere in the government said, wait a second, guys, this is not a good look. This is not a good look. Now, of course, I've talked about this in recent days, and I talked about it last month when it was announced, but nobody paid attention. But after my interview on Biz News, it seems like people are paying attention to what's happening here. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the SANDF and the Department of Defense are now trying to postpone Operation Mosi III to a later date. Now, that is prudent diplomacy. I wouldn't call it kowtowing or bowing. I would say it's clever. And if I were South Africa's diplomats in quiet circles, I would be turning to the Americans now in a private conversation saying, all right, your turn. We're trying to cooperate and work with you so we can get around the issues we have. This is a good faith gesture on our part. Now, whether it's a good faith gesture or not is open to speculation. But the reality is, this definitely is a much better look for South Africa's government than what they had scheduled. So Whoever's responsible for this postponement, smart move, very smart move, and long overdue. It never should have been announced in the first place until after the G20 summit. Bottom line. Breaking news out of South Africa, where the Department of Defense is trying to postpone Operation Mosi III, a combined Russian, Chinese, South African naval exercise scheduled during the G20 summit. Now they're trying to postpone it to a later date. What say you, South Africa? Mzansi? Cheers.